else would not only use a charity visit to declare themselves the biggest victim of all time, the most bullied person in the world, thereby minimizing anyone else's experience in what's supposed to be an open space, but also publicize that bit? But the Meg. Hi everybody, I'm Beebs Kelley. Welcome back to another royal news video. Before we get into today's video, I would like to invite you to subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment, it helps out the algorithm. If you don't know what to comment, just leave a yellow heart and click the like button, only if you want to. So Girls Inc. is an organization that focuses on leadership initiatives for girls. They support and mentor girls with messaging about empowerment and women's empowerment, girls' empowerment. I perused their website. It looks like they focus on giving girls opportunities to pair up with mentors and to connect with women who are successful in their fields, things like that, to set good examples, stuff like that. Provide them with role models and inspire girls to be strong and successful and independent and things like that, which is great. And with how Meghan Markle talks about things, we know a lot of the talking points she likes to use kind of align with these things. She declares herself to be a feminist. She declares herself to be a leader. She declares herself to be somebody who has always advocated for women's rights, even though that doesn't match up with her actions. And she even speaks in ways that contradict herself some of the time. Setting that aside, a lot of the messaging that Meghan Markle tries to use would align with Girls Inc. So on the surface, it seems like it would be a good fit of an organization for her to work with or partner with or support or sponsor things, whatever. It seems like it matches up value-wise with what she advertises, if you could put it that way, what Meghan advertises for herself and what Girls Inc. is. It seems like those values would align, at least occasionally, setting aside the fact that much of what she says contradicts and the actions don't match up. If we set that aside, on the surface, you would think the Meg and Girls Inc. make sense. Just think about the types of sound bites that Meghan likes to throw out there. Like I said, since we've already acknowledged that the actions don't match, let's just think about what Meghan puts out there, the sound bites she uses. Dish soap story on repeat. The bits about losing her voice, finding her voice, using her voice, constantly saying stuff like that. Even told a room full of self-made businesswomen in Nigeria at a leadership panel where the women in the room were actual leaders in their fields in Nigeria. She even told them that she herself was the best role model and leader for their nation, for the girls in Nigeria, in a super cringy panel dressed like this. So Meghan tries to use messaging that would, on the surface, align with Girls Inc. And getting involved in an organization like this does make sense. If you recall, just a few videos back, I'll try to link it here for you if I can, in the top 5 video where I discuss the top 5 pieces of PR advice Meghan should follow to try to reset her image or fix it or salvage it in some way, shape, or form, if that's even possible, that she, and Harry too, should volunteer their time to an organization similar to this one that aligns with their values. And no, I don't think she listened to the video. So at first glance, this does seem like a good move in terms of PR, in terms of making sense for the career she's trying to curate, not really successful at. But naturally, the Meg sabotaged this effort. Any potential for good press squandered immediately because Meghan publicized it and she called herself the most bullied person in the world. Not just somebody who's experienced bullying or who was affected by online comments. No, the most bullied person in the world. So what's wrong with this hitting the papers? What's wrong with this being publicized? Well, firstly, it immediately comes across as self-promotion, seeking good press, and using the organization, the most gross of the three. Using a charity, especially one that involves children, just looks bad. It just comes across as a bad look. Now, if it quietly got out in the press because one of the moms posted it on social media or something, it wouldn't be the same. But Meghan gave this story to various news outlets, well, not that newsy of outlets, magazines and websites. She publicized this on purpose, including the soundbite that she said. So that's really unfortunate because that just immediately backfires and provides evidence that she was just trying to get good press here. If you just go to an organization and volunteer your time for the purpose of volunteering your time, you wouldn't have pictures, at least not of this quality. You wouldn't publicize it. You wouldn't then a few days later, or this came out like a couple weeks, I think, after she had actually done the visit, you wouldn't then send pictures and a soundbite of things that you said to news outlets. Like, that's ridiculous. To make that effort then negates any sort of doing good that you showed up there for. You were clearly just trying to do good for yourself. So that's problem number one. Next, it also invites people, observers, the general public, to look a little further, like I did. I perused their website of various donors. Meg was not listed, Archewell was not listed on any of the donors or partners. She also has not developed a long-standing relationship with them. This was the first time she went there as far as I could find. So this was a one-off, further driving home the point and backing up the theory that this was all just for press. And when you have ulterior motives, it defeats the purpose of doing good, like she always tries to say. Furthermore, all the articles ran with the nonsense that she said rather than anything about the organization or the initiatives or the locations that would highlight the cause itself, leading to any sort of positive impact. All of that was negated and bulldozed by Meghan's ridiculous, over-the-top comments. So that made it exclusively self-serving to Meghan. Now on to her claim that she's the most bullied person in the world. The most! So this is a weird thing to say no matter what, right? It's just a bizarre statement to make. It's very histrionic. It's very over the top. When you think about somebody who says something like, they've been treated unfairly at their job, maybe, you would listen and you would understand. But if somebody says they are the most unfairly treated person at their job and they have never had anything go right and the boss has been out to get them from day one and everything's been terrible, you might think they're exaggerating a tad. That's just the very first layer of problems to this statement, that it's arguably false. It's a subjective statement. It's clearly exaggerated. But on top of all of that, why would you want to try to take that as a label? Or I'm hesitant to use the word title because of the implications in this situation, but why would you want to declare yourself the most bullied person in the world? What is that even supposed to mean? What point is she even trying to get across here? It's so bizarre for anyone to say. And like I said, arguably completely false. I can think of many people who seem to be more bullied than Meghan. The problem is that Meghan conflates criticism with bullying and always has. So has Harry. Much of what Meghan and Harry receive is backlash to their choices because they are controversial in their choices and the things that they have done. Talking smack about your family on public TV, like on Oprah and Netflix, is generally frowned upon by most of society, pretty much no matter what your family did, unless it was criminal. Okay? Just for one layer of the problem here. Meghan and Harry have lied a lot as well. So a lot of what they get is backlash and response and reaction from the public and the press to the many contradictions, lies, exaggerations, and falsehoods that Harry and Meghan perpetuate. They're also really big hypocrites. So there's a lot of feedback to Harry and Meghan that would not be categorized as bullying because it is fair criticism and reactions. Any public figure who's going about being hypocritical, publicizing their actions and their statements, doing something else entirely, making poor choices, being controversial, is going to be criticized. That is not the same as bullying. Furthermore, people just don't respond well to absolutes like this. Always statements. They're not healthy or rational in general, and they're almost always not really very true. For example, you can probably remember a conflict or just someone in your life who will say stuff like, "You always do this," or "They're never treating me fairly." These sort of always, never, the most of something statements, even if it's something positive. I'm the most strong. I'm the best basketball player. I am the most beautiful, whatever it is. These types of statements just simply come off as really self-absorbed, over-the-top exaggerations that lack awareness. It's more evidence of Harry and Meghan's general social ineptitude that they don't see how these types of statements come across. Like when Harry said Meghan did the job better than anyone else in the royal family was laughable, because not only could we see that she wasn't doing it better than anyone else, but also it came across as really foolish and awkward and silly thing to say. You generally want to avoid those types of absolutes and big grandiose statements because they just don't come across well. Staying humble is always a good idea. No matter how confident you may be in something, the moment you forget that humility and forget to be humble is the moment you open yourself up to more criticism and more scrutiny. So imagine the scenario of what happened here. She's there talking to young girls about online safety. And while a personal anecdote makes sense, this wasn't exactly that. This was a big declaration that was irrational and foolish. For these young girls, saying something like that, it's almost like setting some sort of a weird bar. Like, unless you reach this threshold, your bullying is much less than the Meg. It's not a very healthy approach, and it doesn't set a good example. It also demonstrated that this grown woman, who should be setting an example of how to deal with those things, or maybe just sharing advice of the things that she likes to do instead of be online, and inspire cool hobbies that take your time and attention away from social media. Instead of taking an approach like that and just keeping it wholly in the good example territory, which is what she should have done. Instead, she's giving them an example of a grown woman who is declaring herself the most bullied person in the world. How overdramatic and ridiculous, and lacking any sort of a good baseline for these girls. Regardless of the Meg clearly not being a good role model, you can't deny that there is a risk that some of these girls would have looked up to her simply because she is there calling herself a duchess. And these young girls have no idea the story and the big picture of the Meg. And now they're seeing her as somebody, if there was a young girl there who did look up to the Meg, there is a risk there that that young girl would then correlate that bullying and that victimhood with part of that situation and image. Not a good situation. The opposite of what Girls Inc. is trying to do with these sorts of events and coachings that they offer girls. And if the Meg is sitting there claiming she's the most bullied, then it's simultaneously minimizing any other person's experience. It also makes it seem like some sort of weird badge of honor, or rather a chip on the shoulder of some kind. I don't know. It's really inappropriate and weird, a weird approach to take. And because her statement was so ridiculous and over the top, there was no coverage of any helpful advice either in the articles, in the unlikely event that she offered any. The articles covering this had nothing useful in it at all. Also, the Meg's experience is nothing like what these girls could possibly relate to, especially at their age, but just in general. The scale and the entire situation with the Meg is completely different than what most average girls will be facing one day in social media. It's a completely different thing. Now, while the feeling can be the same, the Meg didn't take that approach and dive into simply how it felt. So what I'm getting at is the Meg should have left aside comparing her experience to that of anyone else and saying she is the most bullied person in the world. The Meg could have instead taken the approach of discussing how online comments affected her negatively and what she did to get through that time and what she found useful in avoiding online comments, distracting herself from them, and not letting them bother her. Because any online comment, no matter the scale, no matter how many people have said it, whatever, no matter the scale, any online comment can leave the person feeling just bummed out and generally negative about what they read. And so, instead of trying to scale it, she should have just focused on, I've had online comments that I found to be unfair and hurt my feelings. And this is what I did to shift my view on it, to avoid thinking about it, to get past it and not let it bother me. If she would have kept it in that space and left aside her sort of competitive seeming self-declared status as the most bullied, then she could have delivered something relatable to the girls, because it wasn't about what kind of bullying, how much of it, etc. She wouldn't have put a value on her bullying. It would have just, which, as I've said, was not bullying, but criticism, regardless. She wouldn't have put a value on it, on her experience, and she would have been able to just communicate the relatable side of this issue, where she could have had a connection of, yeah, online comments got to me and bothered me, and this is what I did. That's the only way that girls could have related to her in this situation. But because she didn't take that approach, then she made it completely unrelatable to these girls, setting aside the fact that the Meg brought this criticism all on herself. So Meghan didn't even deliver the relatability that she apparently somehow thought she would be by doing this, attending this event. But perhaps most importantly here, Meghan herself is a bully. It's evidenced by the reports against her by countless employees, over a dozen recent employees who also signed affidavits that their account of her being a mean and toxic boss is true. And straight from Meghan and Harry's own mouths in Netflix, Oprah, Spare, and other interviews where they very clearly, directly bullied people in real time before our eyes. So the audacity to claim this ultimate victim of bullying is out of control hypocrisy. So it's poor taste all around. It's not a professional approach. It wasn't helpful. It didn't even garner her good press because once again, it brought back to the surface the bullying reports and the bullying articles that have been coming out about how Meghan Markle exhibits a lot of bullying behaviors. And it also showcased the little list we always talk about, the Meg's list. It's this running list that she clearly keeps track of in the back of her mind, of any slights or news stories or people that she didn't like and wants to sort of get back at or correct in her mind, like a clapback of some kind that usually flops. It usually backfires and blows up in her face, this time included. But we see this from her in almost every single appearance that she does. She weaves in one of these list items, an old article or a comment from somebody that she wants to sort of reference in some way, shape, or form. And so this entire visit was clearly performed with the sole purpose of responding to the bullying story in the Hollywood Reporter, which was backed up and expanded upon by the Daily Beast, both of which reminded everyone of the original bullying report from palace staff. The fact that Meghan Markle formulated this entire visit with the sole purpose of saying this line of being the most bullied person in the world and having it run in the papers is gross. Bad person territory. It's a shame for Girls Inc. It highlights Meghan's weirdness. And it's yet another example of her toxic and grandiose behavior. This, of course, came at a time when Harry appeared to the public to be hiding from Meghan, staying away on his trip for longer than planned. The weird surfing picture popped up randomly, still with little confirmation of his whereabouts. So naturally, things were looking a little off in terms of the Sussexes when, out of the blue, comes the news that they bought a home in Portugal. As you may recall, Princess Eugenie has had a house in Portugal and been spending some time there, but she's rumored to be moving back to the UK, or at least going to be spending the majority of her time in the UK in the coming years. So she's kind of stepping away from Portugal, and Harry's stepping towards Portugal. It's all very odd, and only fueling the divorce rumors that have only intensified in recent weeks. Perhaps this was all just a big distraction, but also serving the purpose of Meghan clapping back desperately and pathetically and failing to do so well at the bullying accusations. In the next video, we are going to dive into the scathing but so very true comments from Tina Brown about the Meg. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. I hope you have a very happy day ahead, and I will see you next time.